Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how I made this candy shaker dispenser card. Yes, it dispenses mini M&Ms. This is one of my son's absolute favorite cards. To start, I am going to stamp candy from the following sets. Year 7 from Lawn Fawn, Fox Costumes Before and After from Lawn Fawn, and finally, Costume Party from Lawn Fawn. I am going to be stamping them on Neenah Classic Crest Solar White paper in a Copic friendly ink. I will be doing my coloring in Copic markers today. I stamped way more candy than I ended up using, but I really didn't know when I started this card how much I would need. My previous cards that I did that were candy dispensers had little critters on them. But today I opted out of that. I wanted to make something different than the last couple ones I had done. I'm going to start by coloring my candy corn with Y13, Y15, YR04, and YR09. At some point I do go back in with a slightly darker yellow to add just a little bit more shading to the yellow part. Now here's where I pull out my darker yellow. I used Y17 just to make each of the shadows on the yellow part of each of the candy corns just a little bit darker. Next up, I'm going to use C0, C1, and C3 to color in the ends of each of the candy bars. This is just supposed to look like the foil wrapper that is on each candy bar. For the candy bar, I'm keeping the shading at the top and the bottom of each of the candy bars, and I'm leaving the centers a little bit lighter. To color in the rest of the candy bar, I am going to use E23, E25, and E27. Again, keeping the darker colors at the very top and the very bottom. For the rest of the colors, I will be using YG05, 07, 09, B12, 15, and 17, B12, 14, and 18, and R22, 35, and 37, as well as Y13, 15, and 17, and YR04, 07, and 09. Feel free to use whichever colors you prefer. I share my color combinations to help anyone out who is starting out with Copics and is looking for just a few of each color group to buy. When I started getting Copics, I looked at other people's images and found color combinations that I really liked and based my purchases off of theirs. It's very difficult to limit the number of colors that you want when you're presented with over 300 colors. It's kind of crazy and overwhelming. Using my white jelly roll in size 5, I write the word pop on some of the lollipops. These are just the ones that have the wrappers on them. Afterwards, I did try to make highlights on some of the candy with this particular gel pen, but found I needed to get a bigger size. So I pulled out my size 8 jelly roll instead and continued making the highlights on different pieces of candy. Another thing I did while I had my gel pen out was I traced over the words on the candy bars to make sure that they stood out just a little bit more. The brown tends to make it a little bit more difficult to see the black lines. I then cut out all my candy using my brother's Scan and Cut. After this, I kind of jump all over the place, so sorry for that. One of the things I had to do was cut out some circles. So I cut out 2 brown circles. I just used this color because of the cardstock weight. It was fairly thick. These measured about 1.5 inches across. And then I cut out, I don't even know how many of the small circles, which were approximately 1 inch. And then I glue all of the smaller circles on top of each other with liquid glue. After I stack all these die cuts together, I am going to glue around the edges too. This will help keep them all together. Since it will be handled a lot, I don't want anything to come apart. So the next part is where it gets a little bit tricky, and this is why I could not do a tutorial before I started making video tutorials. I am going to take this die from Lawn Fawn from the outside in stitched pumpkin die set. I'm going to place it kind of high up on my panel, and then I'm going to use the circles that I had already cut out as kind of guides, placement guides. And I am going to take another die that's approximately the same size as that brown circle. This one just has stitching detail. I decided to use it for my little flap that opens up to let you get the candy, just to match the pumpkin die somewhat. And then I'm going to take this tiny little die, and this is going to be where my wheel and my handle connect to each other. When I die cut the bottom circle, I am not fully lining up both of the die cutting plates because I only want it to be a partial die cut. So hopefully you're still following me. So now we have the pumpkin cut out, the little circle cut out, and my little half circle that will be the little opening where you get the candy. To make this open easily, I am scoring along the bottom of it, just using my score tool. Here, I'm just trying to figure out which orange paper I would like as the background. I did decide to do orange because once the candy is gone, you are going to see the back behind the pumpkin, and I still wanted it to have some kind of a pumpkin color. So my white panel measures 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. So my orange and white striped panel is 5 by 7, as well as my card base. I wanted there to be a little bit of a colored edge all around the whole thing. Now, for the window for my candy shaker, I do it like I do any of my shakers, which is place double-sided adhesive along the edge, and then I use liquid glue past that, and I attach my acetate down. While that's drying, I do die cut some other pieces from that same die set so that I can have a face on my pumpkin. I want it to be black, or at least very dark brown. Not brown, gray. Duh, Jessica. Wow. Alright, I'm just coloring over it. I could have used colored cardstock here, but I had this little scrap, so I just decided to use it. I'm going to be using that same C9? C8? I don't even remember anymore, you guys. I'm going to be using that same marker later when I do part of my sentiment. So, you'll see that again. Anyway, I am going to adhere my little face pieces onto the front of the acetate so that the front of the card, it looks like a jack-o'-lantern. I'm just using liquid glue to attach these pieces. You can totally skip the face if you want. I do like to have something on the front of the card because once the candy is gone, it's going to be a very plain looking card, assuming anybody's actually going to keep it after that. You can make these refillable too. You just have to change how you do the foam tape and make a little stopper at the top. I forgot to do this here. I was a little bit too excited about the card, so yeah, kind of missed that opportunity. But here's my little tube of mini M&Ms. I am taking one. It's important that you have the candy that you'll be filling it with so that you can determine how thick you need the foam tape. And for this, I'm using Simon Says Stamp's Big Mama foam tape, and this is fairly thin. I think I had to use 7 layers in total. I started out with 6 and found as I was filling up my card that it needed to be just a little bit thicker. So in the end, yeah, I think it was 7 layers. This is a little bit fiddly, but after you get all the foam tape together and placed up there, it goes by pretty quickly. So here I'm trying to kind of map out where I need the foam tape to be. I don't need it to interfere with the wheel, and I need it open from the wheel to my little door where the candy will come out. But I need foam tape at the very bottom of the little door, all around the pumpkin, with the exception of at the very bottom so the candy can drop out, and all around the card. Now here, again, jumping around everywhere, I got a different foam tape. This is a little bit thicker, and I have cut out that same little circle that we used to cut out the hole in the panel, and I just cut the tape to fit in that hole. This will connect my wheel to my little handle. A little side note, you will notice that I am using the backing paper from foam tape I've already taken the back off of. So like when I was combining the different layers of foam tape, I would save some of the backing, and that way I could use it to put on other foam tape so that I could die cut it without it sticking to everything. So that's what you've seen me setting that little square foam tape on that I used to die cut my little connector piece for the handle and the wheel. Now hopefully the words that are coming out of my mouth make some kind of sense to you. If they don't, I am truly sorry. Maybe the visual aid is much better. This is really why I did not try to do some kind of picture and word tutorial without it being a video. I just didn't figure I'd convey it very well. Alright, so here I am taking my foam tape and I am going to put it all across the back of my panel where I have marked that it should be. Again, I am leaving the area open at the very bottom of the pumpkin because you have to imagine the candy's in there. It's fallen out into the little wheel thing in the back, and then it has to drop all the way down to the bottom. So just keep that area free of foam tape and you should be good. Now I am going to figure out how big I need the little opening in my wheel in the back. And to create this wheel, I have the 2 pieces of brown cardstock. I have these pieces of foam tape that I am taping together, and then I am going to run through the die cutting machine using that same circle that I cut out the brown circles with. I have cut these 6 times, and I did this because it needs to be as thick as the rest of the card, which I guess technically it needs to be 1 layer thinner than the rest of the card, as I found out when I was going to put it together, because you don't want it to be too tight, but you also don't want there to be too much room between the front and the back panel. The wheel needs to be able to spin, but not, where there's tons of gaps. Anyway, I have cut out a little triangle from it, just enough that an M&M or 2 can fit in there. I then measured, and this was about 1/4 of an inch thick, and I cut out a strip of cardstock at 1/4 of an inch thick. This is fairly thin cardstock. I am going to glue it around the foam tape. This will just keep things from sticking. It's slightly less, gross. I mean, none of this is exactly made for food, but I don't know about your children, if you have any, or the children in your family. Mine would totally eat candy he finds on the floor. Like, he just would. He's done it before. Little kids. Anyway, this is just to kind of clean things up a little. I'm using the handle of a paintbrush to kind of get in the little V shape to make sure that it's stuck down pretty well. And this just polishes the wheel off a little bit. Now, at some point you will understand, if you haven't already figured it out, how this whole thing is going to work. I am going to take my little foam circle that I had cut out, and I am going to place it in that little hole. I am going to attach my wheel on the back of the panel, and then I'm going to attach my handle on the front of the panel. Now when you turn the handle, you can see that little wheel is moving, and that is what allows your candy to fall out of the pumpkin and then be dropped off into the bottom of the card. Here I'm attaching my orange panel onto my card base. I'm using my stamp positioner tool to help line it up. For this particular paper, it is so very thin, I cannot use liquid glue in large areas. It'll just bubble and warp and look really bad. So here, this is where I was really thinking hard about how to get this candy into the card without there being so little of it or it causing issues with it closing up. Because before, when I made it, I had actually made the little stopper so that I could fill it up afterwards, but I forgot to do it this time. So what I found worked the best was putting the candy inside the pumpkin, putting the card base on the back of it, and then flipping it over real quick and trying to keep the candy in the same spot. Then I'm removing the foam tape and I'm going to try to lower it onto the card base. This was a little bit nerve-wracking because I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to line it up the right way. I do think the candy in the center really did help me with lining it up, so I was pretty happy about that. I didn't have any huge issues here. But again, if you make a little stopper for the top, you don't even have to worry about this part. Now I had to figure out something for my sentiment. I decided to take that same C9 marker and scribble on some paper, and I am heat embossing my sentiment, which will be have a, and then there's going to be a space, and then day. So I'm heat embossing those separate from each other. My full sentiment will read, have a sweet day, but I'm going to die cut the word sweet out from a sweet Lawn Fawn die. I can't remember the exact name. I will show it on screen in a minute, and you will be able to find it linked in the description box below. For my heat emboss sentiment, I am using just basic white embossing powder. This is the same one I use pretty much every time I use white embossing powder. It's just Ranger White. It's what I have. It's what I use. And now I'm going to cut out these little sentiments with the Avriel sentiment dies. You can use whichever ones you have. These are just the ones I happen to have. Okay, now that those are die cut, here is that Scripty Sweet die from Lawn Fawn. I cut this out 3 times from white, and I also used that same C9 marker and colored an area of paper and cut it out so that I also have sort of a shadow. For the top one, I am going to kind of color it like candy corn. So the bottom's going to be yellow, the middle is going to be orange, and the top is going to be white. For these colors, I used the same colors I used for the candy corn before, except for, I don't know if it was the lightest color I left out. I didn't use all 3 colors. I only ended up using 2. Originally, I thought I would only use 1, and then decided later that I just wanted it to have a little bit more dimension. So with my slightly darker color for each, the yellow, the orange, and even the white, for the white I use C1, but I'm just going along the bottoms of the letters where I thought maybe there might be a little bit of a shadow, just to give it a little bit more dimension. Now that that's done, I am going to glue my pieces together. So I'm going to glue the 2 white plain die cuts down together first, and then I'm going to glue my candy corn stripe one directly on top of those. And then my black one, I am going to glue that on the back, but I am going to offset it slightly. This will give it a little bit of a shadow and separate it just a bit from the white card base behind it. Now that all my sentiment pieces are ready, I can glue them to my card base. This is where I wish I would have planned a little bit better for my sentiment placement, because I did have some weird areas where the candy was poking out just a little bit. You could kind of see it. I didn't really like it. So I did take some of my extra candy pieces to try to go over my little sentiment strips just a little bit to, I don't know, make it look less awkward and more intentional. And now I'm going to address that little circle that is on top of my wheel. It is cut out of the same pattern paper that I made the background out of. I did not like the white circle on top, so I did have to fix that. It's just the same die cut as before. I used liquid glue here because it was such a small area, and you did see me rub my finger over it to make sure it was a thin covering of glue and not really thick, because it would still bubble and be ugly. Here I decided to take my jelly roll in size 8 and make some little highlights on the jack-o'-lantern face. I did this because I felt like it got lost just a little bit, and then while I had it out, I decided to make some little highlights or shine marks on the word sweet. And now my card is complete, with the exception of the inside. I always wait until I'm about to deliver the card before I put anything on the inside. But here you can see there is nothing in the bottom of the card. Spin the wheel and there's your candy. If you guys decide to follow this tutorial, I would love to see your creations. If you have an Instagram account and you post it on Instagram, my account's linked below. Please tag me. I'd love to see what you make. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with another video soon.